Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome back to Children's Time. Now, before we get started, make sure you go get some pencils, crayons, and a piece of paper for our drawing time later. Last week, we talked about how one person in the entire Israel nation was hiding something from God, and that caused a big problem. When people no longer hid anything from God, they were back to taking the land. After a successful battle at Ai for the second time, Joshua and the people of Israel are now onto the next city, Gibeon. Now, this time, Joshua and the leaders had a little bit of a tricky situation. They needed to tell whether something or someone was telling the truth or not. You know, you and I do this every day, actually. We tell whether something is real or fake. For example, if someone tried to dress up like our parents and try to pick us up from school, we probably will see that they're not and won't follow them. Or if you've ever been to the supermarket, the cashiers that receive a big bill would sometimes double check to see if they got the real money or not. Our brains and our eyes help us to see and make decisions, but sometimes things get really hard to see if they're real or not. Let's do a short quiz. I have some pictures of some logos here that you'll recognize. I want you to see if you can find out which one is real or not. Look closely. How was that? Was that easy? Well, for some of you, I'm sure. But for Joshua and the Israelites, something was very hard to tell. After winning the cities of Jericho and Ai, Joshua continued to lead the Israelites in conquering the land. This was the land that God had promised to give to the Israelites. God was on the side of the Israelites, so all the kings in all of the lands were very worried. They decided to join together and form a big army to go against God's people. Now, the city of Gibeon was actually very near where Joshua and the Israelites had camped. The city did not have a king, but it was big. It had a lot of fighting men. The people of Gibeon knew that God was on the side of the Israelites and that they became very afraid. They thought of a plan to protect themselves. The Gibeonites were very tricky. They loaded up their animals and made it look like they've been traveling for a long time. They wore old and worn out clothes. They even put dry bread and moldy bread in their travel packs. The Israelites were camped nearby. But when the Gibeons arrived, it made it seem to Joshua and the leaders that they were coming from far away. The men of Israel looked at the old clothes and the moldy bread. The Gibeonites said that even though they came from a far away city, that they've heard about how God had let them out of Egypt and conquered Jericho and Ai. They asked if the people of Israel would make a special agreement to never hurt the people of Gibeon. This was called a peace treaty. A special agreement like this is actually a very big decision. The men of Israel should have taken time to pray and ask God, but instead, they just thought, this is not a big deal. God wants us to take over all the cities in Canaan, but it seems like these visitors were from a city that's so far away that a peace treaty wouldn't hurt us at all. We will just promise to never hurt them. So they said yes to the peace treaty with the Gibeonites. 3 days later, the Israelites learned about the truth. Gibeon was not an enemy city far away. Gibeon was an enemy city very close by. In reality, Gibeon was actually no more farther than 20 miles away from where the Israelites had camped at Gilgal. They had made a terrible mistake. You see, God has told them that they were not to make peace treaties with people in Canaan because they worshipped false gods. They did not follow the true God. And now that they're in a peace treaty with the Gibeonites, they cannot take over the land. The Israelite people were not happy with their leaders. They complained that the Gibeonites should not be allowed to get away with this. But the leaders said, we have to keep our promise. Finally, they came to a decision. They will keep their promise not to hurt the Gibeonites. The Gibeonites would have to do the work for the Israelites. So from then on, the Gibeonites would have to carry water and cut wood for the Israelite nation. So what's the big deal in this story? Well, Joshua and the leaders failed to ask God before they act. You know, sometimes it's very hard. Our brains and our eyes seem to help us to make our own judgment, but God knows the best way, and we need to ask Him. We need to seek His voice so that we can make wise choices. All right, Turn to the person next to you and try to answer the following questions.
It's question time! Which city is part of our story today? Canaan, Hebron, Gibeon, or Lachish? How did the people of Gibeon felt when they heard about the defeat of Jericho and Ai? They laughed at how weak the two cities were. They were afraid of God because he was leading the Israelites to conquer the land. The Bible did not say. What did the Gibeonites do to trick Joshua and the Israelite leaders? They wore old clothes and brought moldy bread to pretend that they were from a faraway city. They brought along lots of animals and pretended to be wealthy. They spoke a different language. God told the Israelites to make a peace treaty with people in the land of Canaan. Is this true? Is this false? Or is it because God never said? Joshua and the leaders prayed to God before making an agreement with the Gibeonites. True? False? Or the Bible did not say? Let's think deeper. Joshua and the Israel leaders trusted their own eyes and their own judgment. They knew that God is leading them to take over the whole land, and they were not to make peace treaties because the Canaanites worshipped false gods instead of God. Joshua and the Israel leaders did not ask God what they needed to do. We need to seek God's voice so we can walk in His way and make wise choices. Let's draw. Today, we're going to draw a think bubble, like this one. Write in this bubble of a time where you were unsure of what to do in a particular situation. Now, draw a speech bubble, like this one. Write in this bubble your prayer to seek God's voice. Trust that our God hears when we seek Him, and He will help you to make wise choices. Let's read our verse of the day. Be strong and very brave. Make sure you obey the whole law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn away from it to the right or the left. Then you will have success everywhere you go. Joshua 1:7. Are you ready? Let's try this one.
Thanks for joining me in this week, and I'll see you